The prelude to our narrative begins 5 years ago. Several people barge into a house in alert mode, equipped with guns. The leader orders his crew on what they should do. He tells one of them, Bobby, that it's not bad for his first job. But it's not over until they cross the border. The leader tells Bobby to hide the money in case someone arrives. So Bobby goes to another area of the house and finds blood on the wall near the stairs. Blood and descending stairs is not a comforting combination. Soon the crew meets in one place except for Bobby. Another member unexpectedly appears, prompting all of them to quickly aim their guns at him. After realizing it's one of them, they lower their weapons. However, once the leader says Bobby went to hide the money, the man who arrived points a gun at him. He instantly demands to have a fifth of it for himself. Before the leader has a chance to respond to this treachery, Bobby returns in a severely injured state. He tells them they have to escape. He would have urged them instead if his injury wasn't considerable. But the money-obsessed man keeps demanding to have his pay despite Bobby's obvious wounds. The man reveals where he put the money, and something no one sees takes him away into the darkness. Out of anger, mixed with confusion, the leader shoots the man whose mind centers around currency. As this happens, another teammate falls to get dragged away. A third member follows, leaving only the leader. Whatever is in there, it tries taking him, yet he manages to escape with a limping injury. While he is running away outside, our attention is brought to a signpost that indicates the name of the street, Penance Lane. The scene changes to 5 years later. We see a man walking along a road with a backpack, like a vagrant. In a different location, we see a truck arrive near a pub with a couple inside it. The young lady does not want to do something the man tells her to. Her persistent refusal causes him to smack her. Lucky for her, the man we just saw happens to now be there to witness this crude behavior. Without hesitation, he opens the truck door to throw the man out. The savior warns this offender that he made the biggest mistake of his life. He is about to throw a punch, but the tougher man prevents it from landing. He tells the trucker that where he came from, anyone there could have destroyed him. The tough man is our protagonist, Crimson Matthews. After he educates the trucker regarding who he is, Crimson tosses him back down on the ground a toy. He also grabs his switchblade prior to pocketing it. Startled, the lady in the vehicle gets out. She has to look back a few times as she walks away. Then Crimson approaches the nearby diner. He looks at his note, which has the same address on it as the one attached to a notice on the door. Therefore, he takes the note with all of its phone numbers before going inside. And there, Crimson meets the employee, Jan. Her daughter soon comes, who happens to be the lady he defended. Jan worries about her face, but the daughter, Sherry, says she is fine thanks to the man. Later, she comes to thank him. Jan also comes, and Crimson asks her if she could tell him about the job connected to the phone numbers he took. Jan doesn't recommend it because it's a big commitment. We learn he got out of prison yesterday. Despite having been in such a place, the man behaves chivalrously with the ladies. In turn, they behave politely toward him. We also see him holding a chess piece that looks like the queen. This segues into a flashback of him playing chess with someone. Although we see neither of the players, we should infer Crimson is one of them. The other man asks him what he's going to do when he gets out. Crimson answers that he does not have many options. The man he plays against gets a checkmate on Crimson. With his victory, he says sometimes one has to throw the battle to win the war. Out of the flashback, Crimson walks on the street away from the diner. At that moment, an officer calls out to him. After Crimson turns to him, the officer says he better have a good reason for hurting his son. Crimson simply says he doesn't like guys who smack young ladies. The policeman does not argue with those words. Then Crimson arrives at a house. There is a man on the porch there who guesses Crimson is the one looking for a job. He introduces himself as John, a priest. Jan spoke to him, informing the man that Crimson had been incarcerated. Yet John is a reasonable person, telling our protagonist it is what's inside someone that counts. On top of the payment Crimson will receive, he is allowed to live in the house free from rent. But observing the shabby place, Crimson jokes about how much of a win it is for him. John just wants him to clean the house. While the duo walks outside, Crimson learns there is a door in the house that has been permanently locked for about a decade. Following this, we see two boys walking together. The area in which they walk is Penance Lane. They come to the house where Crimson and John currently do not reside. The one named Tommy knocks on the door. He heard something in there, making him go check the back of the house. In the meantime, the front door opens for the other boy to see. Thinking Tommy opened it, he enters the house. We see Tommy in the back getting taken away by an unseen force like Bobby was in the beginning. Returning to the diner, Crimson thanks Jan for putting in a good word for him. He also inquires about John. Jan informs him John is the man who has held the town together since the mill closed. A man named Ray used to own the mill. Sherry adds that Ray is the one who used to live in the house Crimson is going to fix. When the mill closed, Ray became ruined and his wife got sick. John helped them a lot, but unfortunately, Ray's wife still met her demise. We see the man in question sitting nearby. Soon, Jan invites Crimson to her place to have steaks. This prompts Ray to stand up to accept the generous offer. The man is not of a sane mind as he starts eating Crimson's sandwich. Since the situation has grown somewhat uncomfortable, Crimson tells Jan he could come over some other time. At night, he investigates the house with a flashlight. He finds an interesting ornament on a door that looks like a framed baby head. Once he walks away, we see blood on the floor. Inside a crib, Crimson finds a cutout from a newspaper article. There is a picture of a couple on it with their baby. He puts it back before going to another room, where he looks at his queen chess piece again. This sparks a second flashback. His opponent friend tells him they have been cellmates for 3 years. It's amusing to him that not one time has Crimson asked him why he's serving his sentence. Crimson says if his friend wanted him to know, he would have told him. Due to this being their last chess game, the man says it's time to tell. He starts asking Crimson for a favor. We don't get to hear what that favor is. Instead, we exit the flashback, seeing Crimson sleeping on a bed in the house. A lady wearing a mask uses this vulnerable time to quietly enter his room. She looks at him while holding a knife. Then she exits the room and closes the door such that its key falls out. Not very stealthy of her, because Crimson wakes up. Trying to open the door, he discovers it is locked. What's worse than it being locked is that someone starts banging on it. Crimson responds by barricading the door. Come morning, he wakes up to someone banging on it again. It is heavily barricaded. The man removes all the items, which allows him to find the key on the floor. He descends to the front door, finding that it too is getting knocked on. Behind it is Jan with her daughter, who brought donuts for him, but instead of inviting them into the shabby abode, he says he's on his way out. Jan says her number is on the donuts and Sherry invites him to sleep on the couch in their place. Jan agrees with her daughter, thinking this house is inhospitable. However, Crimson puts their invitation on hold for the second consecutive time, for he is in a hurry to leave. The two ladies look at each other in confusion, as if they are wondering who would keep walking away from them. Later, Crimson is at a hunting supply store. The employee tells him he can't sell the man a gun. He also thinks it would violate his parole. Then Crimson sits on the steps near his current house. A man on a motorcycle soon drives to him. He tells Crimson that when the latter calls, the former rides. All Crimson tells him is he has some stuff to take care of. The arrived man says some people are starting to wonder where Crimson is. He gifts the ex-convict with some supplies, who says he's doing this for a friend. Suddenly, we learn he isn't at this house to help John fix it. We can imagine the man who hired him won't be too happy to hear this news. Near the diner, Sherry walks and the officer comes to her. He says his son feels terrible about the fight they had. He also wants her to know Crimson is not going to be in town for long. The man has done many bad things to many bad people. Due to the people being bad, the officer doesn't think what was done to them was wrong. But he does not want Sherry to be part of the ex-convict's collateral damage. Sherry disallows him to give her advice, telling the officer she can make her own decisions about who she wants to be around. At the house, Crimson continues to investigate with a gun that his friend brought him. He sets up a light in a certain room while we see someone hiding in the darkness there. Crimson uses a tool to open the door with the baby head ornament on it. Alas, this does not get him anywhere because a metal cover now blocks his path inside. He starts slamming it with a hammer, only to create small dents. With that plan ruined, he rests on his bed with his gun resting on him. Hearing people talk prompts him to sit up. He exits his room and we observe a few young people drinking elsewhere in the house. Crimson comes to them, taking a boy by his hair to slam him against the wall. He demands to know what they are doing there. Then, he tells the four of them they have 10 seconds to get out of his house. Another boy starts giving him an attitude, which he quickly learns was a bad idea. Crimson grabs him with no effort, despite the boy being armed with a crowbar. Soon they hear banging, causing Crimson to throw the boy he was holding in another room. There, the masked lady we saw earlier stabs him with her knife. Another person appears with a grotesque face to instantly start fighting with Crimson. There are several of these strange people who ignite chaos. Crimson manages to save one of the girls by throwing the masked lady against a wall. But the one with the grotesque face returns to fight him. Even after being stabbed in the face, this seemingly modified person keeps on going. He is tough, handling Crimson quite well. We probably didn't expect to see a tougher individual than our protagonist. Yet here he is. In a short time, we get another flashback that finally shows us the man Crimson is talking to in his chess game. It's the man who escaped at the beginning of the film. He informs Crimson that the inhabitants of the house took out 3 of his crew members effortlessly. Plus, they got his little brother. The man says there are $3 million in the basement of the house. If Crimson destroys those abnormal people, half of the money is his. Before the flashback ends, he says sometimes one has to sacrifice the queen to win the war. The next scene shows Crimson leaving the house with his backpack. To ruin his moment, the officer is there to point his shotgun at him. He wants Crimson to know that he's not merely an officer, but a sheriff. The ex-convict complies with him by dropping his gun and getting on his knees. Crimson advises him not to enter the house. Then, the sheriff knocks him out with his shotgun. On the following day, Sherry drives up to the house. Entering it, she calls out to Crimson. No one answers, so she ascends to the second floor. She hears a door shutting somewhere while she's in his bedroom. Sherry goes to investigate where it came from. She comes to the door with the ornament on it and opens it. Lucky for her, there is no metal covering there like there was for Crimson. Or perhaps she's unlucky. It doesn't really matter because someone comes at her to knock her out. An unknown amount of time later, she wakes up near Crimson, seeing both of them are restrained by chains. In the same room are the strange people. The masked lady comes to Sherry, prompting Crimson to yell that she stay away from her. The man assures her he's going to get them out of this mess. Soon a man in a gas mask comes to knock Crimson out prior to undoing his restraints. He wakes up lying on a table with a light shining down on him. In the meantime, the man in the gas mask takes Sherry away. An unseen man starts talking to Crimson, saying that at first, he thought the latter was a federal officer or an undercover policeman who was sent to shut them down. However, he now realizes Crimson is just a common criminal. Once Crimson says he thought it's what's inside that counts, we see the man who was talking as John. These are the words John said to him upon their meeting. Afterward, we see the man in the gas mask is none other than the sheriff. He smacks Sherry like his son did, except the dad's smack is harder. John tells Crimson that several years ago, a group of criminals came to the house to hide the money they acquired through robbery. John found the hidden money on that very night, which he used to upgrade his facility. Crimson is curious to know what it's used for. Indirectly answering him, John says the human body can be worth as much as $45 million. Switching back to Sherry, we see Bobby is still alive. He is restrained while behaving like an animal. The sheriff takes him out so Bobby can seemingly the poor lady. John wants to add Crimson to his collection of criminals due to how well he fought. He knows Crimson will take longer to break than the others did, but he will break. Everyone does. When John tries to work on him, Crimson manages to strike him and start undoing his restraints. Then, he comes to Bobby to throw him away from Sherry. He punches the sheriff too. Bobby shows Crimson that he won't be an easy target by fighting him. Crimson sees a tattoo on his hand, which reminds him of the same one his cellmate had. At that point, he realizes Bobby is his friend's brother. He starts saying Bobby's name to get the man to snap out of his altered mental state. Unfortunately, it does not do the trick. Crimson resorts to getting Bobby on the floor, where he takes his life. With his victory, he saves Sherry and they start escaping. As they are making progress, the duo runs into the masked lady. They just look at each other for a few tense seconds until she motions in the direction she thinks they should go. Listening to her, they enter a room that has a hidden area for them to go through. Meanwhile, John is very disappointed to see the sheriff on the floor. He intimidates the man before commanding him to take care of the problem. Switching back to the escaped individuals, they run through an underground tunnel. We see the sheriff being angry with the masked lady, kicking her on the floor. Had he known she helped their enemies escape, he would have done worse than that. The duo escapes to the outside, a place that looks like a junkyard. Crimson urges Sherry what she needs to do to save herself. He wants her to find her mother for both of them to get out of this town. After Crimson mentions the money being gone, Sherry becomes surprised that this is why he was there. Since it's gone, he has no reason for being there. As he is running away, she yells out to him that he can't simply leave her there. Then Crimson arrives at a place where he sees a car he recognizes from his initial arrival at the house. We see two guys in suits getting inside it and riding away. Upon rushing back to her diner, Sherry starts frantically explaining to her mom the grisly situation that's truly taking place in their town. The sheriff enters the room very conveniently for her. All Jan can tell her daughter is that she's sorry, while all the sheriff has to say is that Sherry merely had to mind her own business. A man behind her starts taking her away against the poor lady's will. Returning to the guys in the car, Crimson surprises them by being in the backseat. He easily deals with them prior to taking them out of the vehicle. From the one who is still conscious, Crimson demands information about the evildoers of this town, but the man feigns ignorance, which Crimson punishes with pain. After having received enough of it, the man tells him that John is in charge of the inventory. Subsequently, the man wants to make a deal with Crimson. Looking at the man's phone, Crimson learns Sherry's sold. The man tells him her will sell for a total of $4 million, money that he says could belong entirely to Crimson. The man arrived at the house, hoping to acquire $1.5 million. Now he's given a chance to nearly triple that amount. Yet what does our protagonist do? Not being evil like the rest of them, he responds by taking the man's life. It's his way of saying no deal. Then he opens the trunk of the car and finds a bag of money. He can just take that amount instead and still save Sherry. Two birds with one stone. The next scene shows John in the basement with a restrained Sherry. She panics, but he tells her she is about to embark on a journey of great purpose. According to the vile man, what she will accomplish today will be more than what she could accomplish in 20 years. All she can do is throw the F-bomb at him. John knew she would reply in such a manner, adding that he could read her like an open book. He tells her about an anesthetic he has that induces paralysis without blocking a person's experience of pain. It fills her with fear to hear about it. John wants to start by taking her. He starts spouting a verse from the Bible and Crimson appears to interrupt him by slamming him with a heavy pipe. While John holds himself in pain in the corner, Crimson frees Sherry. After fleeing from the room, the sheriff calls his son for him to call for backup. Then the tough man enters the room to slam Crimson on the table. The second battle between them ensues. As they fight, John gets out of the room. We also witness many people gathering outside the house with melee weapons. The sheriff's son is among them. The man himself searches for Sherry. He comes close to finding her, yet she manages to run away. She runs downstairs, where someone knocks her down. Switching back to Crimson's fight, the masked lady enters the room and sees the tough man has the upper hand in the battle. She slides a pair of scissors for Crimson to grab, which he uses to gain his victory by impaling his opponent. We see the sheriff with John in the room with the injured Sherry. Seeing that John is injured, and taking into consideration how he treated him, the sheriff stabs John. Afterward, he grabs Sherry and starts taking her away. At that moment, Crimson appears to demand that he let her go. The sheriff retaliates by radioing his son to have him enter the house to destroy Crimson. This allows him to continue with his plan of taking Sherry away. His son comes in with his friend to start fighting Crimson. It doesn't take long for the tough man to emerge victorious. The masked lady is also there, coming to John to take the knife out that the sheriff placed in him. But instead of saving him, she uses it to give him another stab. She and Crimson look at each other before she runs away. Outside, Ray gives Jan a phone for her to call the state police. Then Crimson enters the basement, where he finds the masked lady hiding. She drops her knife, prompting him to put down his axe. She gives him a locket with small photos of 2 children. After he looks at it for a few seconds, he gives her the locket back. As he starts leaving, she stops him to give him the axe. He whispers that she should come with him. Unfortunately, she refuses. Crimson decides to leave his queen chess piece on a shelf beside her that he's been carrying around for some time. Outside, the sheriff roughly places Sherry on the car Crimson used to arrive there. He opens the trunk to find the bag of money, which makes him laugh in delight. Much to his dismay, his good luck is very short-lived because Crimson comes to hack his head nearly off with the axe. Sherry runs to hug her hero. At a different time, we see them riding away in the car together. Then they stand beside it and Sherry guesses this is where they part ways. She asks with concern where he is going. A mere look from him causes her to say it's better she does not know. The man gives her the bag of money. Looking inside, she asks with amazement how much is in there. There is a lot, he says. She has a hard time accepting it, but he says she earned it. He wants her to get as far away from this place as she can. Sherry thanks him for everything he has done. After she leaves, Crimson finds a motorcycle with a note on it. The message says, "When you call, I ride." It is from his friend whom we saw previously. Following this, we see his cellmate in prison. A guard brings him a postcard from Crimson that says sometimes one wins the battle in addition to the war. Crimson's friend can only laugh with gladness. Meanwhile, Crimson drives the motorcycle to a destination unknown. For the final scene, we return to the house. Ray sits inside of it, eating a sandwich. He seems to leave the other half of it for someone else. An arm quickly appears to snatch it away.